What is up? It's your boy Johnny Shreve, aka Mr. Tell It Like It Is. Today I'm diving into one of the biggest debates in fitness: experience versus evidence-based training. We live in a world where everybody is quoting studies, but let's face it, when you're in the trenches and have coached hundreds to maybe thousands of people with real world problems, you quickly realize that science can only take you so far. Before we dive into it, I'm not just gonna shit on science-based or evidence-based training. It does have its value. It provides very reliable, scientifically tested guidelines that help us ensure safety, effectiveness, and consistency. When it comes to evidence-based or just research, most of them are very small sample sizes. Many research studies are done with smaller, generalized groups of people. They don't reflect a wide variety of the actual population. It's a small sample size that doesn't actually reflect the population. Not everybody is a trained athlete. Not everybody understands how to train properly. Not everybody has the same backgrounds, the same life situations. A lot of variables that affect someone's output or results are going to be heavily overlooked when it comes to small sample size studies on evidence-based training. When it comes to the real world, there is a wide variety of people. When you have these small groups or studies, the people are picked based on very similar things. Similar in age, they're probably young, and most of them sometimes are students because of the readily available to actually participate in a study. It's hard to go get a bunch of people out in the world who have jobs, kids, families, careers, want to come do a study on, protein synthesis or the effects of doing machines over cables. It's very hard to actually do that, to be able to get an actual group of people that reflect the actual population, right? This doesn't account for the differences of age groups, fitness levels, or people with specific health conditions who might respond to some of the exercise differently. If I do a study on an exercise's effectiveness, and my study is 50 people, those 50 people are all probably from the age range of maybe 20 to 30. 20 to 30, there's 50 of them, majority of them are students, and they all have very similar athletic abilities or backgrounds. That does not reflect the mother of three, the father, the career man, the older gentleman, the newbie. They are not a good representation of the population. Number 3, short durations in studies. Many studies last like a few weeks to maybe a month. Long-term effects of proper training aren't effectively measured in some of these studies. They're just really small sample sizes. So I really want to get a good representation of, or a good idea of what's gonna happen if I do said exercise or do said methodology for a year, you don't really get that often. Why? Because it costs a lot of money. Number 4, controlled conditions versus real world application. Guys, studies tend to take place in very controlled environments. That's how they have to make sure that these studies don't have too many biases or variables. It has to be done in a controlled environment. Variables like nutrition, rest, and workout intensity are highly regulated. In real life, people have busy schedules, varying access to equipment, fluctuating in energy levels, difference in workout environments. It's a strict controlled study that does not reflect the world today. Number 4, standardization of exercises. Exercise are standardized, but this doesn't reflect individuals' differences in form and biomechanics, right? Variations in flexibility, limb length, and technique are not accounted for as much. Look at the studies that you're seeing out there. Any study. Are they taking into account that the difference when someone is squatting is heavily going to be weighed on the person's shin bone length, their thigh bone length, and their torso length? Are we getting a big group of different types of that to be able to give us a better understanding of what the population actually looks like? Because if I randomly take 10 people outside and I put them in one room, we're gonna get 10 very, very different variables on all fronts. Number 6, lack of individualization. That's one of the biggest ones. What does that even mean? Studies generalize exercise prescription, ignoring personal goals, limitations, and strength, right? Now, these studies aren't done with there's no emotions in these studies. These studies aren't done just really thinking about, hey man, I want to make sure that coaching this person up in this study and making sure that they understand that here's your goals, and it's not taking those things in account whatsoever. It's getting yourself a group of people that are very similar, so we have some very good numbers that are variables across the plane that can be compared to, because if you did a study where everything's really random, you wouldn't be able to see the results for that study. And then when it comes down to it, last but not least, outcomes measured may not reflect real world problems. Simple. Research often measures specific outcomes like maximum strength or VO2 max, aerobic capacity. While these are valuable data points, they may not fully capture what matters most in their fitness journey, such as, reducing injury risk, improving mobility, or overall well-being. Studies may miss subjective elements, how people feel during training. Now let's compare. I've been coaching for almost 2 decades now. I've definitely coached almost close to 1,000 people individually. Consult the other day, and at a consult the other day, my boy, he calls all the time. He's starting his career as a coach. He's in the Middle East, and he's like, hey man, if you give me some really good advice, what would it be at the end of our call? I said this: you're gonna start an online business, I understand that. Your job is to, if you can, get in-person clients. Coach them in person. Why? Because coaching is a skill. Coaching isn't something that you can just say, I studied for a while, then you're just gonna start making plans for people. When it comes to coaching in person, what happens? What does that do? It gives you an understanding of understanding people, understanding how people think, where people come from, different backgrounds, being able to adjust and apply for that person specifically. And then when you do it over and over and over and over again, you get these real world problems and real world cues like I have. Cues like pretend you're milking a cow, or pretend someone's tickling your armpit to, activate your lats. But when you're a coach and you're a trainer in person, that is where you gain all of your knowledge. This is something that you just can't find in a study and then just apply it. Anecdotal experience is always gonna be a lot better than a study that's done somewhere. I'm talking about experienced trainers. Remember that, experienced trainers, because there are some bad trainers out there who don't have experience, and 100% evidence-based backed, science-based studies 100% are gonna be better than a terrible coach without experience. But I'm talking about guys like Mike Van Wyck, who still coaches people in person, Jimmy House, Joe Bennett, the hypertrophy coach, Phil DeRue, myself. Good coaches who have experience, that's who I'm talking about. So let's make that clear. Now, when it comes to real world experience, number one is working with a wide variety of clients with different body types, different goals, different fitness levels, different limitations. Those are one of the biggest things. When you bring, I had this slogan at my last gym. It was called bringing average to athlete. Bringing somebody from basically not really knowing much at all to moving well. You know what you learn when you have somebody who has a limitation, or let's just say you're training with somebody who has a long torso and short legs, and you learn, hey, I know how to make sure this person can squat differently. I know how to make the adjustments to help them. I know what to look for when I have somebody who has that type of body type. I know there's gonna be a lot more bending at the back. And then you have to adapt your programming for those individuals. I can't just get a study and be like, all right, guys, this study says this. Long length partials or a full range of motion or X, Y, and Z, and I'm gonna give this to this person here. It's like, no, that doesn't work. I need real world experience. Studies often test under ideal conditions when it comes to coaching. Why is it better to have a coach with experience? It's a wide variety of clients. Over the last 2 decades, I've coached kids from the ages of 12 all the way to my currently have clients that are in the 60s plus. I know how to coach a wide variety of people, the age, gender, limitations, health conditions. I had a client this year who had a brain bleed, couldn't walk, was having issues walking. He could only walk for about 5 minutes and then that would be it. And I had to program everything for him, for just him. And in a month, he was walking for more than an hour to 2 hours to be able to go on vacation and walk up and down the sand, not have any problems at all. Unfortunately, he ended up having a brain bleed. But guess what happened after that? His OT was like, this incredible how much he's recovering. Why? Because if he wasn't training before that, he'd be in a lot worse position he's in. And the guy's recovering like that. And guess what happens? Guess what happens when the OT's finished? Just talking this morning, I come back in, I take up the next block for coaching, and then I take him from the next step. That's what you get from experience. I'm more likely to understand how exercise actually applies across a population. Studies are often very narrow participants. Studies are not gonna give you the data you need to when it comes to what I just said. The difference of coaching someone who's 12 years old and coaching someone who's 20 years old, and coaching somebody who's 40 years old, and coaching somebody who's 60 plus years old. You have to be able to adapt, and you can't get that experience through just reading studies. You have to actually do it. Personalization and adaptation. in the real world, when somebody walks into you and somebody hires you and you got to coach them in person, you got to go through, maybe it's in person or if it's online. Mostly in person is gonna be better. You cannot be in-person coaching, period. But even if it's online and somebody comes in and they give you their questionnaire, just like myself, when you sign up for Johnny Shreve Fitness, you get a questionnaire, and that questionnaire comes back, and I have all the data that I need. That I can take all the data that I see there, and then right away my brain's being like, boop, 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 boop. I've had this kind of client before. I know how to start making a plan based on this person. And I take my experience and I adjust everything I need to adjust for that client. A lot of times when it comes to studies, personalized approach yields way better results than a standardized routine. It's obvious. You can't just give somebody a standardized plan. Here you go, guys, here's a plan. Do that. Person A, that's not how it works. Now, when it comes to long-term perspective, I've been in the gym since 11 years old with a coach. There are coaches out there like myself who have decades of data of coaching people in person. You've actually seen somebody progressive overload and actually put on 5, 10, 15 pounds of muscle. Heck, in the last year, my client Carolyn, who just competed a couple weeks ago at Nationals, she put on 7.5 pounds of muscle. I started coaching her 3 years ago. There is zero study that's out there that's gonna give me some data on how to coach her. I had to learn in person with her. Observing patterns across many clients. That's a thing, that's a massive thing. I can spot trends. When I get different clients, it's like, hey, I remember this type of client I had before, because when you coach a wide variety of people, there are some trends that will pop up. Now, again, I'm not saying that evidence-based isn't good. I'm saying that experience within education is going to trump evidence-based training. Considering nutrition, sleep, stress, motivation, and mental health alongside exercise is a lot. Trust me, I'm a person who's very open about my mental health. Do you know how many people that I coach who have a past of mental illnesses? They're working on the mental illness on their own, but I know that that's gonna affect their day-to-day. That might affect their nutrition. That might affect how they go into their everyday when they're training. There's no study that's out there that's gonna tell me how I should coach somebody who has borderline personality disorder, or who might be going through depression, or somebody who just lost someone in their family. You don't get that experience from a study. The constant feedback that I get from clients is exactly what you need. And that's the most important part when it comes to coaching and experience in person or even online. Making sure you open lines of communication. For me, communication is huge. Every time someone hires me and like, hey Johnny, man, I don't want to bug you. And I say, look, the only way this is gonna work is if we communicate a lot. Because the more you talk to me, the more I understand you and how to coach you. The focus on practical outcomes. Prioritizing actionable results like fat loss, muscle gain, strength, mobility, injury prevention. Using what actually works. I coached myself to a top 5 Mass Olympia win. I got 2 people pro cards on winning national shows. I have your everyday regular person that's going from an average person to an athlete. I know it works. And I know what doesn't work. Now, when it comes to observing psychological and emotional factors, there is not a study out there that can give you that kind of experience whatsoever. A good experienced coach, you're getting all that data, and while you're talking to that person, you're already in your mind saying, this is what I'm gonna do. Based on the experience that I have, this is what I'm gonna apply first, and we're gonna see how it works for a bit, and we're gonna make sure we're adjusting and adapting for that person. And then dealing with injuries and setbacks. That's one of the biggest things that helped me as a coach. Experience. Injuries to myself and setbacks to myself and the people that I've coached. Client that went from not being able to walk that good to be able to walk and absolutely dominate, and then all of a sudden just a wrench into his plans and has a brain bleed and now working his way back up to recovery and killing it, by the way. It's just something that you're just not gonna find in a study. Now again, guys, I'm not trying to say again that studies have no purpose. Evidence-based background studies are absolutely amazing to have. At least give us an idea of things that have been tested out that might and might not work. We get it. There's a difference between experienced coach and a not experienced coach, and then an evidence-based study or someone who just does nothing but studies. Understand the difference and importance of both, but when it comes down to it, an experienced coach with knowledge and education is gonna always trump evidence-based training. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're stuck in your journey, you made it so far and you have no clue how to go the next step to be able to live a sustainable lifestyle with your fitness goals, guys, hit the link in the description below, johnnyshrevefitness.com, fill out the application, let's see if we're a good fit, and let's reach your goals together. Hope you enjoyed that video. Till next time, you know how it is. Iron sharpens iron. Progressive overload your life. In the meantime, keep dream chasing. Peace.